It is hard to fail, but it is worse to never have tried to succeed. Theodore Roosevelt. We're all familiar with the saying, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So you can stop pretending. Stop pretending that there's a version of your life where everybody claps for you. Stop waiting for the perfect time when the risks disappear and the critics stop paying attention. Because whether you like it or not, that moment doesn't exist. Say you sit on your hands, stay quiet, and play it safe. They'll call you indecisive, or you're afraid to act. You'll be damned for your hesitation. But if you stand up, if you swing for the fences, they'll call you arrogant. They'll say you're rocking the boat or that you don't go with the flow. You'll be damned for your confidence. And at some point, you're going to have to acknowledge the uncomfortable part. No matter your choice, you're going to deal with ramifications. You're never going to make everyone happy. And regardless, whatever comes next, you'll have to live with your choices. In essence, every decision is going to have supporters and critics. So then if that's the case, choose to be damned for doing. Because if you're going to be in the crosshairs anyway, give them something worth aiming at. And this shift in mindset is most noticeable when you stop pretending that waiting is neutral. Because it's not. It only feels neutral. It can feel like you're holding your position, keeping things steady, and avoiding making a mistake. But if you really look at it, something is still happening. Time doesn't stop. Things continue changing around you. Other people are still making decisions that can affect you, whether you want them to or not. And most important, you're still becoming something different in that process. That's the part that usually gets overlooked. We tend to think of decisions as the moments where we actively choose something. But there's another component of decision making, and that doesn't always get recognized the same way, even though it has just as much impact. It's the decision to not act, to hold, to wait, to keep things as they are for now. Remember, not every decision and not every situation needs to be rushed. Everything doesn't benefit from immediate action. There are times when pausing is the right move, but that's not what this is about. This is about the moments where you know you're not really waiting for a more clear picture. You know that a proactive decision is needed, yet you're waiting because it feels easier and less stressful. However, while you're doing that, things are still being decided for you in the background. Opportunities are going away. Previous success starts losing momentum. Even your own confidence starts to shift a little because you've shown yourself that when it matters, you hesitated. So when you tell yourself, I'm just not making a decision yet, if the situation needs a decision, you already did. On the other hand, if you're proactive and you do make a move, there's something else almost guaranteed coming behind it. Critiques and naysayers. That part tends to have more impact than the decision itself, because it's often immediate and far more difficult to control. You can think through your options and line things up as best as you can. But once you decide and act, you're no longer the only one involved. Other people see it. They're going to react, and they're going to form opinions. And most of us, whether we admit it or not, are trying to avoid that. Not the making decision and acting, but the exposure of our decisions. Because once you act, there's no hiding behind the, I could have. You don't get to stay in that space where the outcome is hypothetical. And other options, yeah, they're still possible. You've picked a direction and now it's real, which means it can be evaluated. That's where we start hesitating again. Because ideally, we want the version of our decision that won't come with criticism or second guessing. But if you've been paying attention, that version doesn't really exist. You'll get judged for moving too fast. You'll get judged for moving too slow. You'll get judged for changing your mind. You'll get judged for staying right where you're at. It rarely wraps up the way we hope it will. So the idea that you can avoid judgment by choosing carefully, that starts to fall apart. And all you're really doing is choosing which version of it you're willing to deal with. And somewhere in all of that, between the waiting, the considering, and the trying to manage how things will be evaluated, there's another aspect that doesn't show up right away. It's what you know and what you understand. Because there are going to be moments where the decision you need to make is clear. You can tell the direction that needs to be taken. You can see what taking that step requires. But you also know what it would mean if you didn't. And that's the part that tends to get pushed aside. You'll try to tell yourself that you need more time. You need more information. The timing just needs to be better. And again, sometimes those are true. But other times, it's simply a way of stepping around something you've decided you'd rather not face yet. And in those moments, something small starts to shift. You move away from what you said matters to you. You start making decisions that don't line up with your values or how you see yourself. And then over time, that gap becomes harder to ignore. You'll feel it in subtle ways. A little more second guessing of yourself. A sense that you're holding back even when you don't have a clear reason why. All because you chose something easier over something more honest. And when you know you didn't act on something that was important, it becomes harder to trust your decisions the next time around. Now, there's a point where your options go from abstract to reality. And up until that point, much of it lives in your head. The what ifs or the different versions of how it could go, you can think it through from every angle without anything really being tested. But the moment you act, it all changes. Now it's on full display. You don't get to stay in that space where everything is still a potential. You start seeing where you were right as well as where you were off target. And taking that first step is where a lot of us hesitate, because it's easier to stay in the place where you can tell yourself, I could figure another way to do it. Or the one that we all use. It's not really that important, when you know full well it is. But action takes away that doubt. It replaces possibility with tangible feedback. If something goes well, you see it. If something doesn't, you see that too. There's no buffer. There's no more stories to hide behind. Because now it's not about what might be. It's about what you actually did with the opportunity in front of you. But there's a far better side to this. That same visibility that might feel uncomfortable at first, it also removes the guesswork. You don't have to wonder anymore. You don't have to keep running different versions of the same scenario in your head, all while you're trying to come up with what seems like the best right option before you act. And whether it negates or confirms your apprehensions, at least you know you're dealing with actual instead of theory. And once things are real and not just possibilities, you start to notice something else. The pressure shifts. The tension in your gut goes away. Because before it was all about what might happen, what people will say, and how you'll feel. But after you've stepped onto that landmine, something is different. You realize the judgment that you were trying to avoid, it doesn't carry the same fear that you gave it. Yes, it's still there. People will still have their opinions. Some of them will be right, some of them won't. But it's not as overpowering as it felt before. And that matters more than most of us expect. Because even if it doesn't go well, there's a certain kind of relief and stability that shows up when you know you acted in a way that lined up with what you believed was right at that time. Nothing will ever be perfect. Nothing is guaranteed. But you were honest with yourself. On the other hand, you should always evaluate the outcome and your impact on it, how you can adjust what you do better next time. But there's no questioning whether you trusted yourself and chose to act. And that's a different place to operate from. Because when the critiques come, and they will, you're standing on something that actually happened, something you took part in, not some what ifs. And over time, that builds a different kind of confidence. A powerful understanding that if you have to be judged, you'd rather be judged for something you actually had the courage to do, not simply talk about. So you can keep waiting for the perfect moment, like somehow that's going to protect you from criticism, because it's not. No matter what, people are going to question you if you do nothing. They're going to question you if you do something. They'll question your ideas, your timing, your patience, or your confidence. What's dangerous is not the judgment. It's the amount of your life you're willing to sacrifice trying to avoid it. You already know what hesitation feels like. You know what it's like to replay conversations in your head, to talk yourself out of opportunities, to convince yourself you need more options or one more something. Meanwhile, time keeps moving with zero care about your excuses. And at some point, you've got to be honest with yourself. Because so many of us stay stuck because we're trying to avoid embarrassment and trying to avoid being seen as failing or a failure. So we build this safe internal prison where nothing bad happens, but nothing meaningful happens there either. So if you're going to be judged either way, be judged for moving, be judged for building something, be judged for taking a shot, be judged for having the guts to leave the starting line while everybody else sits around pretending to wait for their right time. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes with me. Until next time, stay sharp, stay grounded, and keep showing up.